Hansen here from NFL Red Zone. I hope you're checking out 1 hour of 5-Yard Rush, one of the best podcasts on NFL football in the UK.
Good evening, Rush Nation, and welcome to the 5-Yard DFS show. As you can see, obviously Nick can't join us today. He's busy working, unfortunately, for us. So it's just me and Mark this week, and he's finally roped me into hosting. It's taken 10 weeks, but I'm finally going to do a hosting session. So if it's a bit sketchy, that's the reason why I'm in trading. But Mark, thank you for joining us, and yeah. Unfortunately, Nick can't be here to see me host for the first time, but at least you get to have the honours.
Nick hasn't turned up because he hasn't won $1,000 this week, so that's all it is. Because that's why I turned up last week, because he won $1,000. So when he gets another big win, we'll see him again.
So obviously, let's do the recap as we always do, and if you can talk about your recap as so we can take up a lot of the time, so we can move on to the Thursday, because mine was absolutely terrible, and the least we can talk about it, the
better. I had another meh week, as the kids would say. Just wasn't particularly. I was very even again. Was never really in chance of doing anything particularly. Very, just very, very dull week in that respect. I did make a couple of mistakes though. If you don't want to talk too much about your week, particularly Jordan, we could just talk about my two mistakes, which were like learning moments, as I like to think of them.
Yeah, sounds good. Like I said, I think I had like obviously Fields as a stack with Mooney and things like that, but just mixing it up with the running backs, especially where my running backs just didn't hit, and it just killed like my lineup. So mine was just one of them weeks. I think. Well, hopefully, so yeah, we can learn something from your mistakes, Mark, if you want to tell us what went wrong for you.
It wasn't so much. It was something I kind of not forgot, but basically thinking about that Cincinnati Carolina game. I think, like a lot of people, I thought Cincinnati were going to pretty much walk that game, but I didn't really want to play Burrow and Higgins and Boyd. There was just something about the way they fitted in with lineups I didn't particularly like them. And what I also didn't do was I didn't play Mixon as well. And the thing that's frustrating me about that is, if I thought that Cincinnati were going to do very well and sort of easily beat Carolina, if I'm not playing the passing game, I should have at least been playing the running game. Because otherwise, I'm basically saying I don't expect them to do anything, really. Especially in a team where, one, the target tree is so small in a wide receiver, especially with Chase injured. And also, they only really use Mixon. Pirine gets some work. So the fact that that didn't occur to me, that was very frustrating. And then, obviously, I kind of identified that pretty early doors. And then Mixon scored 5 touchdowns, which just was like salt in the wound. And so this situation doesn't come up every week, and I'll talk about a couple of those when we're looking through. I'll talk about why when we're looking through this week. But last week that really frustrated me. The fact that I knew they were going to. I suspected Cincinnati were going to do very well, and I didn't really take a stand on either side. So yeah, that was mistake number one.
Yeah, I think with the Cincinnati, I thought a lot of people would be on the Cincinnati, so I kind of moved away from it and went for Fields and Tua. And like I said, obviously that kind of hit, but the rest of it didn't. And I think one thing I've got to learn with DFS as a new player is just because you're not a fan of a certain player in the fantasy outlook doesn't mean that you can't play him in DFS. I'm not a massive Mixon fan, and every week I'm thinking, and if you look back at Mixon's weeks, they've been pretty, as you said earlier, and he's not really what I've seen anyway, a breakout, and that's what kind of shocks me. And it's sometimes you kind of got to pivot to these players that you may personally don't like, because it might end up, obviously, 5 touchdowns seems a lot for Mixon. To be fair, I don't think we expected that, but still, even if he had 3 touchdowns, it would have been a good play.
Yeah, and it was the 9th highest ever I think PPR score in fantasy or something. So
Wow.
I wasn't frustrated that I didn't predict it. I was just frustrated that I saw that game as a sort of one-sided game, and I didn't. On one side decided I was fading the passing game. I didn't think about the running side of it because, like you say, Mixon was at a funny price as well last week. So yeah, that was mistake number one. Mistake number two, funny enough, was Chicago related. And I did play Fields. I was quite big on Fields. Actually, last week's show I brought him up as my quarterback and stuff, and he's just been so consistent the last 4 weeks or whatever it is now. But the state of the tight end situation last week, the fact that I didn't pair him with Komet because there was no standout tight end really last week at all. And so in that case, you really should correlate your tight end with your quarterback, and I didn't do that. And even if it doesn't matter who I had as a quarterback, you should if you're going to play somebody cheap, you don't really, especially a punt play, which basically what Komet was last week. You shouldn't really be playing them as a one-off necessarily, especially not in big GPPs anyway. So yeah, I was frustrated with myself for that because I actually looked at Komet and just thought, no, I'm going to go on the safer bet of Engram, and of course he did one catch for 8 yards or whatever. But that's a result-based comment. So yeah, they were the two things I frustrated with myself last week, which I'll be trying not to make the same mistakes again.
Yeah, hopefully it's a learning thing, and no matter how long you've played it, it's always you always can learn, and you're only as good as your last week, so you just move on, and hopefully it can be better. Like I say, for me it was probably my worst week so far. Playing, and that don't mean I've had good weeks all the time, but it was just a really I were nowhere near cashing and stuff, even though I had the two best quarterbacks for the week. More or less.
Yeah.
The rest of it was just not great. So,
Yeah.
I don't know how you feel. If you want to say anything else, or should we move on to the first?
No, I was just going to quickly say to as friend of the show Jack says, at least you didn't play Mac Jones. Actually, I did play Mac Jones in a lineup, so that was a super contrarian lineup. Jack knew that I was playing him, so he should have changed his lineup then when he knew I was playing him. So yeah, I'm happy to move on and talk about Showdown if you are.
It's another. Every time I seem to be on, obviously I missed last week because the household was very poorly. It seems to be just a horrible matchup on a Thursday night again, and it's the Panthers at the Falcons. Well, to me it looks like it. I'm not going to stay up for it, obviously, and stuff. But as obviously you'll get the Thursday night one up. How do you see it playing out? Is there anyone that's an obvious? Obviously, you've got Patterson at the top. That seems obvious captain, but is there anyone that you could go a bit? It's a tough one. I had a little play around with it earlier, and I stuck Patterson at captain, and you could still do a few things, but it doesn't seem like a confident play. It's one of them games to me that anything could happen.
Yeah, well, there's so many questions here, isn't there? Firstly, this weather situation tonight, allegedly, that's going to have a factor on the game. You've got Atlanta kind of using 3 running backs. Carolina probably have Hubbard back as well, so that means they're kind of using two running backs. PJ Walker and Baker Mayfield could be interchangeable. It's almost like Mariota's the only surefire thing there, really. So yeah, I built a lineup earlier which was very heavy on running backs because combination of the weather and the fact they're both run heavy teams.
Yeah, I kind of like pivot. I know it's an obvious play, like with Patterson at the top of the market for the most as a captain. But do you feel that Patterson obviously came back off injury last week and got quite a bit of work? Do you think he'll start taking the work off of? I think it's is it Huntley and Algier and stuff.
Yeah.
Right, but do you think he'll start eating into them? Obviously, he's in the receiving game. He picks up a lot of points as well. Or is it too obvious to play him where a lot of people will be playing him as well?
Well, he's on the face of it, he's the best play. So, he would be a good choice to captain. As to his workload, he didn't actually have masses of snaps last week, I don't think, even though he ended up with 2 TDs. So they run so much Atlanta, though. You could add Mariota in as almost like a 4th running back. And I think I saw some stat which said they're the only team, I don't know if it was ever or something, got 4 running backs with over 250 yards each or something. something like that. I saw it earlier today. So yeah, I think they're so run heavy that there's room for all of them. I think Patterson, just the way I naturally play, if Patterson seems too chalky as a captain for me to play him. This is one of the reasons why Jack suggested a kicker captain, because if it's a low-scoring game, that makes sense. The only thing I'm concerned about with the kickers is if the weather's as bad as people are saying, maybe kicking will be quite hard. That's the only thing but I don't, it's too early to tell yet, isn't it? So still a few hours out.
Yeah, I know. I looked at the Panthers. I think they've got the third worst rushing defense, on yards per carry and things like that. So obviously that's like you mentioned, the running backs there would be a good play. Is it like obviously that's one thing I need to start learning to do. Like luckily on a Saturday, there's a guy called Matt FF Dynasty who puts out a weather, like Fred, and that's one thing I looked for tonight is the weather. Is it? I'm guessing it's gale force by the sounds when you're mentioning kickers.
Well, yesterday there was the last thing I heard about the weather was yesterday because I didn't think it was too much point looking too far in advance because how many times we set our lineups based around the weather and then suddenly like with an hour to go it's completely different. But it was meant to be like quite. I think the word was stormy was the phrase I saw somebody use. So yeah, I'm not sure right now. I'll check later on tonight. I think before I go to bed probably.
Yeah, I obviously when I did a mock lineup, I had Kuhn as a kicker for Atlanta because obviously he's a very good kicker as well, and obviously he can hit them from over 50 yards. They're not scared to go from Atlanta if they're over that distance, which gives you extra points. Is there anyone lower down that if you're playing like a high, like obviously Jack's put there Patterson's high, but it's highest on captain at present. But if you are going to play Patterson as a captain, obviously you're going to have to go further down.
Yeah,
the board there to like maybe get some of the other big boys as well. Is there anyone down there? People like maybe Tommy Tremble, maybe? Or...
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. Tommy Tremble's had quite a bit of he's had 2 4-target games last couple of weeks, and he's had 2 touchdowns in the last 3. And that sort of price, so even it seems silly on a regular slate 8.1 or 9.9, doesn't even register, but actually on a showdown slate, especially if it's a low scoring one, as everyone's expecting it to be, that could be you're sort of in the optimal. So yeah, he was definitely somebody I thought was worth a look. It really is a horrible slate though. I mean, I'd play a defense as well if the weather's going to be bad. I mean, Panthers is the cheapest, I think. Yeah. And Tommy Tremble's the only one I even considered down there.
I think it was a surprise that when I first saw it, because PJ Walker's getting the start again, after a disastrous game that Baker Mayfield came in later on, didn't he? And he did all right. So I thought he might have got the start or with Sam Darnold coming back. But they stick with PJ Walker. This is obviously a rookie question to you, Mike, from a DFS player. Obviously, a lot of people play numerous lineups, so it might work in that aspect. But would you think about playing one of the other quarterbacks? I suppose it's a bit difficult. Obviously, we're having Darnold and Baker there, but would you think about playing a Baker and thinking that PJ might get dropped, or is it just one of them things where you just can't do that?
So no, it's there's a certain section of the sort of DFS industry who think that playing backup quarterbacks is a really good thing in showdown. Now, obviously, it might only work out once a season or something, because the quarterback has to get injured quite early as well to make it work, and these are points nobody else is getting. So yeah, it's definitely not it's not crazy or ridiculous. It's just you've got to understand that it's like maybe once a season it will work. The issue about tonight is the fact there's potentially 3 quarterbacks on one side. So yeah, I wouldn't personally on this slate, but it's definitely people who do 150 maxing, the big tournaments need to do that. There's some of those who are professionals who put in backup quarterback lineups and stuff. Not many, but just some.
I think you put up there, Jack said that he might see Darnold at some point
exactly.
Mayfield. I know he's being activated. I think he was activated last week, but obviously he just I think they went with Baker by time. I didn't watch the game. I just when I read about the game, they went for him, and like I say, he did all right. But yeah, I just thought I'd ask that question because obviously as a newbie to it, it's just I thought it was interesting to see if that's something that people do.
By the way, every single thing you could possibly want to do in showdowns is viable. The only difference is how willing are you to wait for it to happen or something. Your backup quarterback thing might take 2-3 seasons to work out and stuff. So have you got the bankroll for that? Have you got the patience for that? That's why there's literally nothing. There's no, especially in showdown, there's really no bad construction or anything. It's just about that sort of tolerance to that risk.
Right. So, is there anyone else you would like to talk about on the Thursday night?
No, you've made me talk. You've made us talk for too many as it is. Okay.
It's not a good start to hosting, is it?
Yeah, it's like first and last.
So moving on to the main slate, I was looking at it and it was. I quite liked a lot of the plays, like if you could fit them in, this week, obviously it's easy to say before, but like after it might change, but definitely like looking, I built a few teams and it looked good, but obviously we'll start with the quarterback, and you mentioned him earlier and you're going to mention him again. Which quarterback do you like this week?
Well, I personally like, there's a few quarterbacks I like. I think we're going to talk about a few, but I want to talk about Fields this week. I talked about him last week as well because he's been so consistent, and he has been. And yes, last week he, broke the record, I think, for rushes, didn't he, or something, for a quarterback in a single game. So yeah, my point about Fields though is he's coming up against a terrible Detroit defense this week. And they're away and they're outside of the dome. Because of his running ability, you can stack Justin Fields naked if you want to. You don't have to stack him with any MVP. However, Detroit give up like top 5 fantasy points to every single other position. So, you could stack him with any teammate pretty much in any way. I'm sure we're going to talk about them later as well. What I'd be interested to see, I haven't seen the ownership projections yet, is whether people. So there's a funny thing in DFS, Jordan. I don't know if you've come across it yet, where if somebody does really well one week, people are really reluctant to play in the following week.
Right.
And of course, Fields just had a 40-point game and stuff. And I'm just curious to whether people will actually go back to him or not.
That's interesting because like I would have thought the opposite, where like people would jump on him, maybe not like as like ridiculously high, but people would jump on him, like especially like you mentioned, especially if he's up against someone like obviously the Lions this week. I thought they'd be really heavy on him, but I suppose if you think about it, you'd be like, well, everyone else is going to be heavy on him, so I'll just go somewhere else, and that's where I'll mention my quarterback after. That's what my thinking was. So is that kind of like the wrong thinking to think?
No, that's fine. So what's been happening recently is that's happened. So if you think at the beginning of the week, thinking Justin Fields is such an obvious play, etc., a lot of people then think to themselves, he's too obvious a player. I don't want to play him because he's got high ownership. And then they all go off of him and his ownership drops. However, quarterbacks generally tend to be, the ownership is more spread out than it is in almost every other position. So ownership is never normally a big issue with quarterbacks, I would suggest. And lots of pros who put their quarterbacks in last based on their receivers and stuff to come up with correlation and stuff and stacks. So yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see what happens with him and stuff. I'd definitely be playing him this week in some lineups again.
It's going to be interesting quarterback this week. It's one thing, obviously. I haven't been on Twitter in the last couple of hours, but I don't know if there's anything being said about Josh Allen. But obviously, Kyler Murray looks like he's struggling. Even if he plays or doesn't play, he's going to play with maybe not fully fit. Obviously, same with Josh Allen if he plays. So if
Josh Allen missed practice again today.
Did he miss practice again today?
Yeah.
Then? So if he doesn't end up playing on Sunday, it takes 2 of the big guys out, doesn't it? So it'd be interesting to see how the projections go for ownership after them 2 do drop.
Yeah, indeed. Because this year, more than ever, the high-priced quarterbacks have been more popular. So it used to be you try and save your money down at quarterback, but they've been scoring so many points in this newer version of the NFL that they're very popular.
Is there anything you want to add
on? No. I want to talk about who you want to talk
about. So my guy obviously mentioned. Then I kind of went thinking that people would be jumping on Fields and obviously Tua, because Tua's just been good constantly when he's been playing alongside Hill, and Waddle, which again I probably might end up having more than like having a lineup with Tua and definitely Hill. I don't know if it'd be a fit Waddle in there and fit other people as well. It might be a bit hard because I think
they're
Hill's quite
expensive
high.
stack. Yeah, expensive stack.
So I went with obviously the third, depending obviously with Josh Allen primary. I went with the third option, which was Mahomes. Obviously, it seems obvious that Patrick Mahomes high points getter, as a quarterback. But because of the fields and the two, I thought a lot of people go there. I kind of went with Mahomes, and he's got so many players around him that you can stack with. Obviously, Kelsey's the obvious one, and then you got Smith, Schuster, and things like that. And he's against Jacksonville. I know you hate talking about Jacksonville, that you said off camera before we came on, but they give up quite a lot of pass yards. So that's kind of all my thinking with it, with Mahomes, and kind of like a double stack. I was thinking, with Kelsey and then maybe one of the wide receivers.
Yeah,
well
which wide receivers are you going to play here?
Well, I'm looking at McCall Hardman, but he's. I don't know if he's practiced today, but he was out of practice with an abdominal thing because he's very cheap. But I'd probably throw in a dart if he wasn't available. Because Smith Future's going to be hard to have with Kelsey, because obviously the value. I'd probably throw in a dart if McCall Hardman were playing with Kadarius Toney. I think he got a couple of targets last week when everyone were playing, so that could be an option as well. And I don't want to give my tight end away, but obviously I played a double tight end. I've kind of started doing that a little bit because obviously with Kelsey being so expensive, I play another tight end to bring it down. So that helps if I wanted Smith Schuster as well. But I think Kelsey, you've got to play Kelsey, haven't you, with Mahomes? That's the only problem at times.
Yeah, another thing about your two tight end thing. Kelsey is like a wide receiver, effectively.
Yeah,
in every way. So I would say you play one tight end effectively. But yeah, funny enough, Mahomes. I read something the other day, and I can't remember what it was, or yesterday, saying that Mahomes and Kelsey might not be that highly owned, just because of how much they cost and the rest of the slate. Because it's quite hard. There's no at the moment, because even with the limited injury news we've had, there's no cheap players have opened up yet. Some really cheap options. So yeah, potentially he could be lower owned than he should be, because he's having a great season.
Yeah, he always seems to do all right at home as well. Though I think the Jags are quite a good, not too bad of a passing defense as well. But I think last week when I had Adams in one of my teams and he just went off in the first half, and I'm just hoping that Kelsey or someone can do that as well. But yeah, that's why I edge towards Mahomes there at quarterback.
Yeah.
I mentioned too, is there anyone else that you'd think about playing outside of the top guys?
I might Trevor Lawrence, because I think that game is so stackable, and if you want to get different in the way you're in the stack, because Kansas City defense give up a lot of fantasy points. They do a lot. I mean, they're all what are they? 25th, 24th, 25th, 27th, 21st. Sorry, 27th. Yeah, so that's like quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end. So I think there's points to be had here. I think stacking this game in different ways is good. I think the only way, though, you can stack the game, if you want to say have a bit of an onslaught with, say, 5 of them in there, is you have to play Trevor Lawrence at quarterback rather than Patrick Mahomes. And you're definitely giving up some points in terms of the quarterbacks there, because Lawrence just hasn't got the same ceiling as Mahomes. But it's the only way you can sort of have that game stack.
Yeah, I think when I was playing around, I was stacking. It was hard to get. Obviously, Christian Kirk's the main guy who gets the targets. It was hard to get him as well as the others. So you'd have to pivot down to Zay Jones and hope that. Obviously, he's had a couple of games where he's gone off. He's hit and miss, and hopefully he'd have a hit alongside your stack, and if he doesn't, hopefully other guys do, and you can do okay still. It's kind of fun in it, try to get them all in, because obviously you want to try and get them all in, but then you're like, well, I have to pivot down to Zay Jones, then you just hoping it comes off kind of at you if you are really comfortable, if you really want to play that Kansas City quarterback and tight end things.
Yeah, I think I managed to make a decent lineup where I had Kelsey and Juju from the KC side, and it was Lawrence and Kirk and either Engram or Etienne on the other side. It's very hard to stack three decent pieces of Kansas City in that, but it's a very stackable game, I'd suggest.
Yeah. Running back. Happy to move on to running back.
Yeah.
Obviously, you've got a guy that I was nearly going to put down, and I would have obviously probably taken him off you if I would have put him down, but I decided to go somewhere else as well, so you get to talk about him.
Yeah, well, this is hardly top analysis and stuff here. The running back with the best matchup on the slate this week is surprisingly Barkley, who's the most expensive. And the reason I find this interesting is if I made notes of these, the top 5, the best matchups for running backs in terms of fantasy points allowed, the defenses. The top ones are Giants with Barkley. Then it's Detroit, who's got a little bit of possibly a share between Williams and Swift. Then third is Miami, who's got Mostert and Wilson. Fourth is Chicago, which is Montgomery and Herbert. And then fifth is Indianapolis. And JT should be back, but who knows what role he's got and stuff. So out of the top 5, Barkley's only sort of one in a bell cow role. So if you feel if you're going to pay up at running back, he's almost like a lock, isn't he, really?
Yeah, I thought when I was looking at if you were going to pay up at running back, the two guys at the top of the market seemed to be, obviously that's why they're at the top of the market, because Barkley and obviously there were guys, Henry, who's really started, like, even though he started off slow, he's picking up the pace, and it doesn't matter, like, obviously you might look at his average yards per carry, but it doesn't matter how many carries he has as long as he gets past the 100-yard mark and gets a couple of touchdowns, and that's what he's doing. They're just hammering him, and it's even more so because Tannehill's out, Malik Willis is there. They just seem to be hanging in, handing it off to Henry, and obviously that's what they did all against Kansas City and took them to overtime. They hardly threw the ball.
The Henry hasn't practiced this week yet, but I don't think that's anything to be too concerned about because he usually does a lot of maintenance. He needs a lot of maintenance like that as the season goes on and stuff. I'm not too worried about that. Actually, obviously, he's going against Denver is like it's the best defense, in terms of fantasy points allowed. As in, it's the stingiest defense. However, the one bit that they're remotely weak is running back or tight end. So, it's very hard though to build lineups starting with Barkley and Henry.
Yeah, I tried it and it didn't work.
Yeah, it's very hard. There's just not enough value. There might be a bit of value who's just become available on wide receiver, which we'll talk about when we talk about them. But he's but I mean, Nick Chubb is kind of a little bit of a forgotten man, but he always gets a fairly decent ownership. And it's a middling matchup for him there.
When I was looking at running backs, I found obviously you pay up at wide receiver and you go grab, say, a Barkley or Henry, whichever one you like. It was quite hard to have a massive stack at wide receiver and have a down pay. I think over the last few weeks and maybe the whole season, there's always been that one running back that's around about the 5,000 mark that you could bet in. I think it's quite hard this week to really find one. There might be a couple of there who go off. Obviously, that I don't know if it's true, but obviously you've just clicked on him there, Jalen Warren. I've seen reports saying that he's going to get a lot of the carries over Harris. I don't know how.
Good at this, aren't we, Jordan? We didn't talk about this before. We're getting good at this, though. Clearly,
but I don't know how true that is. I'm not sure who the guy who tweeted it, if he's reliable.
The other thing is it's not like Najee Harris isn't going to play.
Yeah.
But I've got him in a lineup at the moment just because down here at the moment.
Yeah, there's not much, is there?
I mean, if Derrick Henry turns out to actually be injured, then there's some options maybe. But again, it's still a pretty tough defense.
The only other one down there, but it's a real shot in the dark, is Edmonds. Obviously, they got him. The Broncos got him, and they do like to run the ball. But they've already they've got a couple of guys there. Is it you'd think is he going to get that much work, or is he going to jump ahead of him? tough one. It's basically, like I said, it's a shot in the dark, and it could easily not come off.
But they can't like what they've got. I don't think they like what they've got particularly,
No.
and so maybe he does have a chance to take that sort of 1A role.
Yeah, Melvin Gordon hasn't been getting. I think is it Murray that's there? I can't remember who the guy is. I think it's Murray and Latavius Murray who's been getting most of the work, which says something.
Yeah, exactly, and so it's such a murky backfield. I mean, if one of them does, get the hot hand and they play him and stuff, and you've picked him, it's going to be a real advantage to you. But I mean, what about the old Jeff Wilson though? At this 5-5,
I've put him in a couple of lineups because how well he did last week. But it's weird because Mostert's been doing really well for the Dolphins before that. So is it one of them where, like you mentioned, where it's 1 week it's one week it's other, and you just don't know which one's going to go off each week, and you just got to hope if you pick one, it's that guy who goes off. I suppose that's if you're doing multiple lineups, you could probably put one of each in different ones, I suppose. Obviously, I think you had him a few weeks ago. I put Ezekiel Elliott as my running back. He's questionable at the moment. He hasn't been practicing. I've kind of put him in there because if he does play, even though Pollard went off last week and Pollard's 500k more, Jerry, obviously we know Jerry Jones, seems to have a lot of say when it comes to teams, and the amount of times I've seen him this season say, obviously not in these words, he's no matter how well Pollard's doing, Ezekiel's the guy. Ezekiel's the guy. So it just seems to be, even if he is fit, no matter how good Pollard did last week, he's going to get the most carries. And it seems to be like going to be a very run heavy game. That game, Dallas at Green Bay. It could be a running back stack you could have from that game. Because both give up quite a lot of rushing yards as well, over I think about 130 each per game they give up. So it could be an interesting one, especially if people go for Pollard after the game they had last week. He had a phenomenal game. This is one thing that I need to not get frustrated with, Mike, because I had Herbert last week, and I think Herbert's a fantastic running back, but they clearly don't think he's as good as I do, because they keep playing Montgomery.
I tweeted out about a few weeks. It's exactly the same as the Elliott Pollard thing. Like the whole of the Twitter thinks that Pollard should be playing ahead of Elliott, but it doesn't matter because then we don't coach. Nobody on Twitter's there in practice and stuff. Same with Montgomery and Herbert. Herbert has actually, I heard this stat, I was driving home today, even though his snap share isn't huge, he's in the top 10 for utilization of players who have 20 snaps or above, and that's as a percentage. So when he does play snaps, he does get the ball. But again, he hasn't, except for that week 3, which when I assume Montgomery was injured, he hasn't really had a ceiling week at all. Just looking up the list though, the cheapest running back I see who's not got to share carries is Travis Etienne at 7.1, which is very expensive for your first bell cow.
I think.
What's this? Matt Pages to talk Chase Edmonds.
That'll be Kev from Fancy Wildcat podcast. Matt, who also was on the show, is a big Chase Edmonds fan from the start of the season. Yeah, don't worry, he hasn't paid me, and I don't know why I talked about it, to be honest with you.
I don't mind if you get paid as long as you share it with us. And Jeff Wilson's season, another person misspelling the word season, Susan. That's what we're all expecting, isn't it? Is him to take over from Mostert. But maybe Mostert will be the play if people are thinking that Jeff Wilson's going to do that. Yeah,
because I don't think he's done pretty well. Mostert, hasn't he? Before that, I've had him in a few lineups, and he's done well. I think a lot of people have. So it'd be one. It's like you say, that is a good point. That he might be one to play. Is he? How much is he? 6'1", so he's 600k more than Jeff Wilson.
Yeah, and it's a really good matchup for the running game against Cleveland. So we shall see. So if the cheapest sort of bell cow is at 7.1, then you may well end up with people spending up at running back and not spending up at wide receiver. So if you can find a way to stomach cheaper running backs, that might be a way to differentiate yourself.
Yeah, I think most of my builds I had one like higher-ish up running back, but then one pay down, then wide receiver.
Yeah,
I just like you obviously put back in there. I think it's it's a kind of a must play in a few in a few, because if he does go off, there's a good chance you want him to be in your lineup, don't you?
Yeah, it's funny. Other than week 1, though, he hasn't really had a ceiling game this year yet. Week 1, he had 36 points, and then he's been around a 20-point mark. So, you could at that price, you could happily not play him if he's going to stick to that. But it is, in theory, the best matchup of the year for him.
So that means avoid. Sorry.
Yeah, well, probably. You need to look at the ownership, I suppose, to see. Yeah. Should we move to wide receivers now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Obviously,
I think you should go first now.
Do you think I should go first?
Yeah.
I've gone for which I'm not happy about. Not because of the play, just because I'm not a massive fan of him. But you need to put things to the side when you're playing DFS, don't you, Mike? Chase Claypool.
You tried to, anyway.
Recently,
by the way, you could have chosen anybody you wanted to. The fact that you didn't like them is your own fault.
Well, I thought that I'd try and do one a bit further down money wise, and Chase Claypool is 4.8, isn't he, for Chicago? And obviously, you mentioned Fields, and obviously you mentioned Komet and Mooney, who were the stacks. But I can't. Oh, you got it there. He only caught a couple, and he had a rush temp, but he was targeted quite a lot for his first game. After being
6 out of 16 snaps, wasn't it?
Yeah,
he only played 16 snaps, so he was targeted 6 times.
So you'd think, you'd hope that's going to go up by each week, and if against a Detroit, like you said, if Fields, obviously he's going to, they're a rushing team, Bears, so they will rush a lot. But if they do start spraying the ball out, Fields is getting really confident if he's playing the ball around. He could easily see a lot more and grab a lot more targets compared to Mooney. It's one of them where, like, I don't hate the Mooney play, I don't hate the Komet play. I just think Claypool would be a good play. It's a cheaper option for you to be able to pay up in other areas, and no matter how much I'd dislike him, I think I would love him if he ended up doing really well.
Yeah, he's I think it's a good point. If it'll be interesting if you think about the three of the Mooney, Claypool, and Komet. I'm almost happy if I'm going to stack 2 with them, because I might not, because they use the running game so much. But if I was, I'd probably just choose the 2 which I thought were going to be the lowest owned, because I feel like they're all very similar plays. Komet's been very much targeted more in the red zone in more recent weeks than anybody else. But yeah, Claypool got 6 targets out of 16 snaps in his first game for them. That snap count's only going to go up, isn't it? So I suppose it comes down to how much you actually throw the ball, because Detroit are pretty awful away from home and outside of domes.
That's just made me think then when you said it, that could be a way if you want to get 2 of the big running backs in, to maybe double stack with Fields, and if it's Claypool, Mooney, or Komet, whichever 2, because that quite. I don't know how much Komet is, but obviously Mooney's only 5.5 and Claypool's 4.8, so it might be a way to do it if you wanted to. But like you said, you've got to hope that Justin Fields throws more than he has done, and the way he's playing, obviously he's playing with a lot of confidence. It could easily happen, so it might be a good thing to do. But
I don't think he's got enough. He hasn't generally had enough passing yards to sort of maintain 2 receivers with big ceiling games. I might be tempted, if we're going to stack that game, to do a sort of a Fields, Montgomery, Claypool, say something like that.
Not Herbert.
No, well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter which one it is. It's like, I think you could do both of them. But yeah, I think I would be tempted to do it that way. Because let's be honest, there's probably going to be quite a few fantasy points in this game.
Yeah, I think so. There's a couple of games that are easily stackable on the eye, aren't they? Obviously mentioned Kansas City and Jacksonville, and obviously this is another one that and another one that we haven't really mentioned any players with Minnesota, Buffalo, but obviously the Josh Allen thing kind of like maybe scuppers that if he don't play, or is Case Keenum a good play there? I don't know if you want to answer that, or we should just move on to your wide receiver pick.
Yeah, I don't know if he's a good player or not. He's I watched enough of him though. Funny enough, I don't know if we've never spent much time talking about what was my initial pick, because we talked about it quite a lot already. Christian Kirk. It was just really because, just to make the point, that the Kansas City defense is statistically way worse, I think, than people realise. But I've already made that point. So Let me. I'll just quickly look at my get my notes up. The best matchups, fantasy point wise, New Orleans. So Olave and possibly Kamara. I know he's a running back, but he's so involved in the passing game. Denver have a really good matchup. But there you got quite a few people: Sutton, Judy, Hamler, and a tight end to be named soon. Chicago have a good one, so we talk about Mooney and Claypool, and Buffalo do as well. But again, who's thrown to Diggs and Davis there, and then finally Jacksonville. So this is another example of possibly other than New Orleans, with the Olave being really the alpha wide receiver, with the other sort of 3 in the 5 other than Jacksonville, that you're not, there's question marks almost on who to play. Whereas Christian Kirk is clearly the number 1 in Jacksonville.
Yeah. Like that's when we mentioned the Chiefs stacking it. I really wanted to get Christian Kirk in, but obviously his money, it's hard to do. But like you said, he's the clear number 1, and obviously when it comes off his, I think he's had a couple of good. I think he didn't do too bad last week, did he? I think he, I can't remember how many catches he made, but he's like you say, he's clearly the alpha. Like you mentioned, Olave, he's been brilliant, Olave, this year. But I'm not saying he wouldn't have done as well, but it's helped that there's been a lot of injuries around the wide receiver for the Saints.
Yeah. He's only got a massive ceiling so far, but he's only a rookie. But again, great matchup against Pittsburgh for him, and Denver as well. It's got just a really good.
Because I think I threw Judy in there, and I'm surprised how. I think he's 5'7", which is quite good value. Like he seems to be the clear. I know Russell Wilson's still struggling a bit, but he seems to have got, without getting outstanding, he's still getting more production to the wide receivers or tight ends. And Jerry Judy seems to be one of his favourite targets, especially more than Sutton, which is, I thought Sutton might be his number 1 early on. I think he, against us, when the week 1, he took in quite a lot of targets, I think it was. And since then, I know he's had some injuries, but it seems to be Judy's the number 1 wide receiver at least.
Yeah, and but again, it's getting spread out so much and stuff. Neither of them have huge games there. It's almost like a wasted, really good matchup. It feels like. So yeah, it's I think who was it? Hollins. Well, process Hollins. So Hollins is 4-2 because Renfro's just been put onto IR.
Yeah.
Waller's been put onto IR as well today. So Hollins suddenly at 4-2 looks like maybe some value and will be very popular in cash games, I'd imagine. Not a great matchup though against Indianapolis.
No, I think when I looked at that game, there wasn't really much going for me there. The only thing I thought of was Taylor, if depending obviously how much he'd play. It's a weird game, that one, because obviously I would love to have someone in that were a good quarterback for the Colts, but obviously they've got Sam Ehlinger who's struggling. But I did see some flash up on my phone then that saying that Matt Ryan's been at full practice this week, but I still feel like I saw that Sam Ehlinger's going to start.
Yeah. Well, didn't Jeff Saturday say that already?
Yeah, I feel like I saw that on Twitter that someone put that he said he was going to say that, which saying that Matt Ryan hasn't been great, has he? So I don't think it matters either way. It's a shame because there's some good wide receiver plays there against them, but just
I think by the way, we talked about Nichols talks about Amari Cooper and home and away splits, but which is a real thing. But he's got against Miami, who plays so much man defense. He's got a really good matchup, Amari Cooper, this week, even though he's away. So yeah, maybe this is the week he breaks that cycle.
Tight ends. I'll let you go first because you're gonna. You mentioned him a little bit already.
I think I already talked about him so much. I've got to try and find who it was. I said, yeah, Cole Kmet. We've talked about him quite enough, I think, don't you?
Too much.
Yeah. Let me just quickly look at my tight end notes. Again, the best matchups are for, and again, there's loads of questions here. The Rams, so Tyler Higbee, but who's going to be throwing to him? Mm-hmm. Stafford's in the concussion protocol. And if I understand it right, he's only just gone into the concussion protocol.
Yeah, it flashed up today, like on Twitter, and I hadn't heard anything about it until today, which were yeah, it was
Yeah.
quite
I saw
surprising.
I saw about it yesterday, but even so, if he's only just gone into it yesterday or whatever, then he definitely won't be out of it in time because it doesn't allow you that. So anyway, so that's who's going to be thrown to him. That's a question mark. Indianapolis have a great matchup with tight end, but again, that's a complete mess. That situation, isn't it? Cleveland again have a good one, but who is
Don't know
it?
if he's
Is
gonna, yeah,
Joker going to play? When Joker didn't play, Harrison Bryant didn't even get a target. So
yeah, because I
and I
remember I
know,
played him
yeah,
in
oh
the
yeah,
showdown. I
I think
played
I
him
had
in the
him.
showdown.
Yeah,
I
I think I had him.
anything.
I think I might have had him as captain or something because the thing was so good. And then as well as Komet, also Jacksonville because have a really great matchup as well from a fancy points allowed point of view, tight end. But Evan Ingram let everybody down last week, absolutely everybody. So maybe he'll be low owned, and maybe that'll help with those stacks and stuff. But so he's at least he is the sort of tight end one. And then Colt Kmet, I think, is the tight end one for Chicago, judging by the last few weeks. Three
Yeah.
TDs in the last 2 weeks, and his red zone targets have gone up. So it just seemed like the best of sort of messy situations.
Yeah, tight end. Like obviously, I have. If I'm playing Mahomes, I had the Kelsey, which is obvious. It's like you mentioned there. You went through them all. Like I really like Njoku, and I really like Higbee, but I don't know who's going to be throwing in the ball, or if one of them's going to be fit. So I obviously. You didn't mention, thank you very much, earlier when you went through the Broncos players. I went for Dulcich, who's a good price. And when I mentioned, obviously, Jerry Jeudy being one of his favourite targets in the last few weeks, Russell Wilson, since Dulcich has come off IR, Russell Wilson's loved him. He's been going to him for fun. And I think at that price, it gives you a cheap tight end who can, with quite a high ceiling, I think Tennessee gave up quite a lot of pass yards. I think it's near the high 200s, and so it could easily just go off again, no matter how bad Russell Wilson's been. He seems to keep finding him, which is always a good thing.
Yeah, I think he's a nice play. Actually he's in my fan team season long. I put him in this week because after his bye week. So yeah, I think he just needs a touchdown to the last couple of weeks, and suddenly he's got a bigger score. So I think it's a good play. Again, the only issue I have with Denver is there's just so many mouths to feed. The only thing I have, but he does seem to like him.
Yeah, I think, like I said, I can't remember which game it was. It was a few weeks back now where Russell Wilson had thrown the ball about 10 times and he'd found 7 different receivers or tight ends and stuff. But if 2 of them are going to be the guys that stick out more, it's Dulcich and Jeudy. Obviously, I say that it could easily change the weekend, but he does seem to favour them 2 out of a big batch that he's got. So this is the one where I played him. I played Dulcich with Kelsey just to enable me to do other stuff further down. But just like I said, he has got a high ceiling. Dulcich, if it can get to him, obviously it can also have egg on my face, and that'd be absolutely terrible. But if it were against other teams, I might have questioned it. But because Tennessee obviously are going to run the ball loads, and I expect Henry to do well. I think Denver could end up having to throw the ball a lot more to play catch up with them. That's kind of my game plan in my head. Probably won't be now.
Makes sense. I think he's going to be. I think I like him as a play. I think a mini stack of him and Henry might be quite nice as well. If you want to.
I know you don't like talking about the defense as much, but you have put one in this week, which was
I know. It was only because Minnesota is so cheap. But if Josh Allen doesn't play, I think that then Minnesota are too cheap. I think I couldn't find anybody last few weeks. I think there's been some pretty good value in there, so I couldn't see anything particularly there.
Yeah, that's a good point. If Josh Allen don't play, it's good because Vikings have been pretty good on defense this year. I think a lot of the time they've kept them from losing games because I feel like when I've watched the Vikings, I don't think they've been. It's weird because sometimes, like the first half, I'd love to see like the stats and stuff. I feel like they get off to a flyer in the first half. The amount of times I've had Jefferson and he's absolutely flown out of the blocks, the first half, and then nothing, in the second half, and the other team are catching up with him and pulling it back. And I think the Bears did it one week where they nearly pulled it back and beat them, and somehow are they 8-1 are the Vikings?
7-1, I think.
7-1 are they? Right. So I don't know how they are, but it must be the defense that's doing well. I've gone for their rivals, the Packers, who are quite cheap as well. I think they're the fourth cheapest, and they're at home. Obviously, they haven't been great. They've got a few injuries on the defense now, but I think this was more aimed at, because they are quite good at in the secondary. The Packers, they don't give up a lot of the points most weeks. It's just, and I know you'll love me saying this, Mark, the Cowboys can be the Cowboys sometimes, and they could easily just have a flop game, especially at Lambeau. If it's cold as well there, it could easily be a bad day for them.
And they're all crying. All the fans on Twitter are crying. And bring back Tony Romo. He can miss the hold on another extra point or whatever.
So it was just another one of them where I looked down at the bottom and I thought, obviously, it could easily happen where they do all right. Because they haven't been ridiculously bad. It's been more on the offense, really.
Yeah, they've been in lots of tight games as well. The Packers in low scoring games and stuff. There's some. I don't actually think there's. I mean, rather than the Giants, probably, and maybe Raiders, because you don't know what sort of play calling is going to happen in Indianapolis now. It's interesting. The defenses, as ever, I just try and fit in whatever I have left over. When I build my lineups, I usually put in the cheapest one I'm happy to take, which in this case is Minnesota.
Yeah.
But, not that I'm actually against taking Jacksonville either, or even more below, because Mahomes does make mistakes every now and again and stuff. And, they have so many different running backs, plenty of fumble opportunities there as well. So, But where are we going to start to build a lineup here?
I'll tell you what I think we should do just to try it.
Yeah, go on.
I think you've done the, obviously the Fields, and I'm happy to go with Fields and maybe do a stack there with Chicago, and then I can't remember which Komet that you preferred. I can't remember who it was.
What are the receivers and tight ends?
I just wanted to see if we could get two of the big running backs in, just to see.
I see. Got you. Okay.
Because I couldn't do it earlier. I couldn't get it in without.
Well, Barkley would have to get in.
Yeah, Barkley's.
Josh Jacobs has a pretty decent. We didn't talk about him much, but I think he's got a decent matchup.
I think when I looked at that game,
that's middling. That's very middling.
Don't give up too much.
Yeah, no, it's very middling. Etienne's the cheapest. But you want to bell cow. But you want Chubb or Henry in there. Do you want to try?
Yeah, there's not much difference between them both either, is there? So
yeah, try Henry because it's the most expensive. So a D will have to be definitely
go
Minnesota. Yeah, definitely have to be Minnesota. And then you've got 5. Now, Mac Hollins gives us some money. We've just seen that.
Mm-hmm. There is a wide, actually, one, if Packers do end up throwing the ball a bit and actually playing well, Christian Watson could be a play like low down. I forgot to mention him earlier. Could be a play low down because I think he went off injured. Like, he's going to be fine for this week, but he went off injured. Yeah. So he missed a lot of the game. And I think, is it Romeo? I never know how to pronounce it because I thought Romeo Dubes, but everyone calls him Dobbs. So he's. I think he's out this week, and potentially.
There you go.
What's his name? I know Lazard picks up a lot, so I thought he could be the second wide receiver. I think Sammy Watkins. That's it. Not sure if he's how much he's gonna play on Sunday.
Wasn't Lazard on the injury?
I think I saw him.
Well, yeah.
Oh yeah, sorry, yeah. I don't know if he'll play.
He's been limited, so he'll probably play. But look, if you put in Christian Watson, who I see, Ducey talked about this, only you got 6.5 to spend. Yeah. So definitely possible. Definitely possible. You could even do,
Would you bring St. Brown back for the thingy, or would you stay away from that with it being Goff away?
Yeah, at the moment, I mean, he seems he's I don't personally like it, but I get why you would do it because look, he's had 9 and 10 targets the last 2 weeks. He's just not done much with it. And it's not like Chicago's a great defense either, is it?
I don't know if it was on here a few weeks ago where it was saying Goff seems to be a lot better at home and like on the road he's not great.
And in domes. So I'm not sure at the moment.
But you got options.
Definitely got options. Like if you wanted to get some of the KC game and you put in say Kirk or Smith-Schuster, then you even you've even got more to spend.
7-1,
yeah, and you could have a Travis Etienne, a Chris Olave, a CeeDee Lamb, even lots of options there. There you go. That's how you do it. Christian Watson, Mac Hollins make it possible.
Barkley and Henry in the set. Look at that. Looks great there, doesn't it? Just
And then 6:15 on a Sunday, you're like, why did we choose them? Yeah, I think that's good. I think it's a nice lineup.
Yeah, it's one of the, when I started building lineups early today and early in the week, it were one of the most enjoyable weeks I've had by looking at when every time I built one, I was like, yeah, I don't mind that. There's been a lot of weeks where I'm looking at it and going, I'm not sure if I like that, but that's normally when I've done all right. When I'm liking them, they don't do as well.
Yeah. I mean, you've got to imagine Green Bay at some point they're going to get out of this slump, aren't they?
You'd think so, wouldn't you?
And it could be any. He hasn't got his Devontae Adams anymore. He focuses on all the time. So Watson's as good as anybody, I would have thought.
That's one thing that I try and read into, but it can be, obviously, it's one of them. I think it's similar when we talked about the quarterback, putting up a non-starter quarterback to see if it comes on. Like, I'm looking at these teams like Green Bay thinking it's going to turn around eventually. It's got to be this week. It's going to turn around, and it just hasn't. And you just try to be on it when it does turn around, aren't you?
Yeah, because if Watson is the one who gains from it, next week he's not going to be that cheap.
Mm.
So you're trying to get that sort of player then and stuff. And it's that definitely was interesting though. And I suspect by Sunday there'll be another couple of places where some value will open up due to injuries. Like Peoples-Jones has been being talked about as well, just because of the good matchup with Miami and stuff. And obviously that potentially that's another game that could shoot out as well.
Yeah, like I said, some good games this week, and obviously we've got even more football because there's the early kickoff.
Oh yeah,
on Sunday as well.
Yeah, you're playing in Germany, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, you couldn't get over there though.
No, we was looking at going, but then there was no chance of tickets, and I didn't really want to pay ridiculous prices to go in this climate. So I'm going to watch it in my seat downstairs.
Yeah. Hopefully, and you get replays. You get replays in as well. So,
and to be fair, at the start of the year, I was thinking, do I really want to go over and watch Geno Smith? And now I'm like, I wish I would have gone over and watched.
Yeah, exactly. It's Tampa Bay people don't want to see. It's so funny that you'd think that there's one exciting offense and one terrible offense there at the moment. And which way around it is?
Yeah.
Just madness, isn't it?
It's been a weird season, and it's like I say, it's so many. There's not many, obviously. The Eagles and obviously the Bills. Before last week, I suppose they lost to the Jets, surprisingly. But there's not many teams. There's a lot of the divisions are very close, aren't they?
We're bottom of our division. We're bottom of our division at 4 and 5 now. 4 and 5 now. So yeah, not awful.
Yeah, everyone were laughing at that division, weren't they, for many years, and it's one of the best now.
Yeah, I don't know. I think the AFC East is still the best, isn't it, at the moment, records-wise or something. But yeah. There you go. Who knew?
But yeah, if there's nothing else,
no, I think we're done. I think we're done here. Yeah, good luck everybody tonight trying to work out the best lineup for tonight. It's like I might end up playing 6 running backs at this rate.
I appreciate you joining me for me to host my first 5-yard DFS, and
it went very well, very smooth, Jordan, very smooth.
It's a good job you said that, because I was just about to say we'll tune in next week to see if they've let me come back on.
Yeah. The issue at the moment. This show is like the Green Bay offense at the moment. We keep sputtering along to try and get all 3 of us on there and stuff for various reasons and stuff. So
it's happened once. It's happened once.
Yeah, once in 10 weeks. Yeah,
and Green Bay is still waiting for that one time.
Yeah.
So
we're better than them.
Yeah, got a better record.
Yeah.
I appreciate you coming on, Mark, and guiding me through it, making it a lot more easier. I was a little bit nervous before, hosting.
You're a natural. You're a natural. No, I tell you.
No, don't say that. You're making me do it every week.
Yeah, that's exactly the plan.
No, it's been a lot of fun as ever, and
Yeah.
we haven't got Nick to do his trademark ending, and I'm not going to attempt it. I'll be honest with you. I don't want to butcher
Yeah.
it. So hopefully you all have a good weekend and have some big winning lineups, and we'll see you all next week.